What's going on? I want to read from the Hebrew Bible today. This is a translation by Robert Alter. This is a version that I like. I prefer the Hebrew Bible over the King James Version because it has commentary about why certain words were chosen from the direct Hebrew word and why it's the closest match versus what word may be chosen in a lot of other popular texts. I will read the King James Version occasionally, but I really love my Hebrew Bible. So let's look at this creation story here and analyze it, knowing what we know about the principles of the universe from the Kabbalion. So, as the Hebrew Bible goes, Genesis chapter 1, when God began to create heaven and earth, and the earth then was welter and waste, and darkness over the deep, and God's breath hovering over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening, and it was morning, the first day. So this first day, there's really a lot to unpack here. And on the surface, it may go over your head, but you got to understand that this Bible is a amalgamation of all of the states of consciousness that you can occupy. And I say all of them, but it's not all of them. It's a good amount of the states of consciousness that you'll apply. Any religious text, any text of this nature, that no matter where you are, what frequency you're vibrating at, you can look at it and find something that helps you from that frequency. Those types of texts embody states of consciousness that you will inhabit. So looking at this from this perspective, we see, all right, in the beginning, God began to create heaven and earth. So where is God at this point? What are we talking about here? We know that there's three planes of existence. Now, we know that. We know that there is this material realm. We know that there is a spiritual realm. We know that there is a mental realm, right? So now, at this point, God is just consciousness. He's aware, right? And nothing has been created yet. So everything is welter in the waste. And the Hebrew text is tohu wabohu, which the translator here gives us a definition for, and basically says tohu means emptiness or futility. So everything was empty, right? But God's breath is hovering above the waters. So the writer of the Hebrew Bible is looking for a word to describe this substance that is in this space that exists of just existence, right? And the only word that he could describe it as is waters. So God's breath is hovering over the water. So everything is this infinite void. It's empty, right? But it's akin to waters, and God's breath is hovering above it. The writer of this Hebrew Bible gives a definition for the word hovering. And here's what he says. I want to read it directly from the Hebrew Bible. The verb attached to God's breath, wind, spirit, ruah, elsewhere describes an eagle fluttering over its young, and so might have a connotation of parturition or nurture, as well as rapid back and forth movement. Now, that statement there says a lot. The second part of that statement, as well as rapid back and forth movement, alludes to vibration. So everything is vibrating in this void. It has a rapid back and forth movement. But the first part of this statement is really where I want to direct your attention. It describes an eagle fluttering over its young, as so might have a connotation of parturition or nurture. So in this state, this void, God is nurturing all of the infinite potential that is. So in this space where everything can potentially be, we see everything is vibrating with unlimited potential. And essentially, the first creation is love and the potential of God. God nurturing this infinite potential that is. And then God speaks amidst the vibration, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So this is the first judgment here that we see. God says, let there be light. So in this space, this void, the light and the dark are intermingled. The light and the dark are intermingled in this space. And what God does is he divides the light from the dark, and then he looks at the light and he determines it to be good. And it's interesting because it's not until God says that the light is good that it's divided from the darkness. So God creates the light and it's all that is. Then he assigns a judgment to it. And the moment that he assigns a judgment to it, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. The moment he assigned a judgment to it, it became a thing as appearing separate from the opposite, which is darkness. Understand, it's God's judgment of the light as good that created that darkness. But the principle of polarity exists here. The light and the dark are two frequencies of the same thing, just polar opposites. So God calls the light day, and the darkness he calls night. And the evening and the morning, the first day. So the first judgment creates a separation or an illusion of separation, light being good. There we see polarity. It creates dark by default. That's important for later. The first day is the dawn of rhythm, and it exists in all things. So the Kabbalion talks about the principle of rhythm, that everything, that the swing of the pendulum is back and forth, the rhythm exists in everything. The measure of the swing to the left is a measure of the swing to the right. You're going to hear me talk a lot about rhythm when we talk a lot about reality creation methods outside of this particular model here. But as far as this model goes, looking at the Hebrew Bible, this is the initial rhythm, the initial creation of rhythm. So in this creation, in this first day, we see the laws at play here. We see God being consciousness, being awareness, creating in a space of a void. We see some of the greater laws coming into play here on this first day. So we're going forward. And God said, let there be a vault in the midst of the waters, and let it divide water from water. And God made the vault, and it divided water beyond the vault from the water above the vault. And so it was. And God called the vault heavens, and it was evening, and it was morning, the second day. So in the second day, light and dark waters are divided. So we talked about the description that the original Hebrew, the writer of the Hebrew text, used to describe this environment that God is in before anything has been created as waters. Then we see God dividing light and darkness in the waters. Now we see God dividing the waters themselves, creating spirit, matter. So God calls the waters above the vault the heavens, or the spirit realm. And God calls the waters below the vault, or at this point we haven't assigned any judgments to anything below the vault. It's just waters. So on this foundation that's built in this void that's vibrating, we have a foundation of love that's overlaid with light and darkness. We see waters divided from a spiritual layer that's added above the light and darkness. We see there being a separation between the heavens and what we're going to go on to add tone to in the third day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered in one place, so that the dry land will appear. And so it was. And God called the dry land earth, and he called the gathering of waters, and the gathering of waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth grow grass, plants yielding seed of each kind, and trees bearing fruit of each kind, that has its seed within it upon the earth. And so it was. And the earth put forth grass, plants yielding seed, and trees bearing fruit of each kind. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening, and it was morning, the third day. So the third day is really interesting because we're dealing with the waters beneath the vault. So these are all concepts that are happening within the mind of God. And what he's doing with each layer that he goes in is he's adding tones of reality to his creation. So on the third day, we're in the waters beneath the God, and we're in the waters beneath the vault, and we see all of these things being made of the substance of God. So whatever this void is that God is made of, he's creating all of these substances out of it. We haven't gotten to matter yet. All these things that we're talking about in these days are all things that are happening within the etheric mind of God. God being infinite living mind, ether, or as we'd consider it in this particular instance, all spirit. An even greater version of spirit than we think about when we talk about general spirit. At this point, spirit is just a concept in God's mind. All of these things that he's created the spiritual essence of from the stuff that he is. I want to point out here that in everything that God is looking at, he's assigning a judgment that it is good. And we already know from the initial assignment of judgment that light was good, the division that occurs whenever you assign judgment. So when God assigned a judgment that light was good, he instantly created darkness. So with all of these things that God is assigning judgment to, the antithesis exists by default because that is the law here. And don't get it wrong, this is a text that's showing you the law in application. So the judgment assigned creates the possibility of barrenness by default. Polarity is still in play. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the heavens to divide the day from the night. And they shall be signs for the fixed times and for days and years. And they shall be lights in the vault of the heavens to light up the earth. And so it was. And God made the two great lights, the great light for dominion of day and the small light for dominion of night, and the stars. And God placed them in the vault of heavens to light up the earth and to have dominion over day and night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening and it was morning, fourth day. So on the fourth day, we see God performing work, assigning jobs to the light and darkness that already exists. Now he's directing it in a certain way, telling it how it's to operate. On the fourth day, you could call it God creating the lower or natural laws. So all of the laws that govern the Hermetic principles, starting with mentalism, are already existing from before God begins to fashion anything. The lower laws, or natural law as we call them, were created after foundations were laid upon which they could be created. So creating the process of the planets that governs astrology, time, by law, the antithesis exists. But in perfect thought, God does not invoke excess potential. So in everything that God's creating, he's creating it in perfect balance. As he's ruminating in thought and adding layers to his thought forms, you see he's assigning a judgment to it, that it's good, that it's for the good. But he's not dealing with excess potential because he's impeccable in thought. And God said, let the waters swarm with the swarm of living creatures, and let fowl fly over the earth across the vault of heavens. And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that crawls. And the water had swarmed forth of each kind, and the winged fowl of each kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the water in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And it was evening, and it was morning, the fifth day. So the fifth day was really interesting to me because it's very specific. And on the sixth day, you'll see that it almost seems like there's a repeat, but there isn't. On the fifth day, God drops anchors. So he's been building this creation in thought, layer by layer. And don't get it twisted, all of the elements that he's created have their own consciousness because God is building it from the substance that he is, which is infinite living mind. So all of these thought forms are conscious ideas within the mind of God. And here is the first time that he creates thought forms of creatures. So he creates great sea monsters. In the King James Version, it specifically names things like whales. He created every living creature that crawls. So we're talking essentially about insects here. He had the water swarm, at which the water had swarmed forth of each kind. So he's creating schools of fish and the winged fowl of each kind, the birds that flock together. Essentially, what he's doing is he's dropping anchors of consciousness to hold the framework of this reality in place. So you see how birds seem like they're operating on a frequency of which they're all in tune. You see the same thing with schools of fish. They're not necessarily aware of some of the things that even higher animal life forms are aware of, but still their consciousness is tuned into something. It's almost like they're all communicating telepathically, which they are. They're attuning to a frequency. They're holding their consciousness, their belief, their gift of life is strategic in that they laid the foundation of thought. So even if knowing what the outcome is going to be and how this play is going to play out, this layer holds everything that he's created before in place. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the water in the seas, and let the fowl multiply over the earth. And it was evening, and it was morning, the fifth day. So these conceptions that God creates, these anchors that God creates, he blesses them, telling them to be fruitful and multiply. That's their job, this consciousness. The way that they occupy this space is simply to be fruitful and to multiply. And if you observe them, they give you lessons from looking at their patterns. You look at their patterns and you can see the way that consciousness evolves. You can see the way that consciousness learns and the way that consciousness operates and the way that consciousness just takes care of all of the creatures that occupy this space. There was another point here on the fifth day. This frequency that these levels or these conceptions are operating under is really the first instance of hypnotic rhythm that we see anywhere. So before we get to even the wild beast or man, we see hypnotic rhythm is in play in the world. The rhythm that locks birds together to fly coordinatedly south or fly wherever it is that they need to fly. That's a rhythm, that force, hypnotic rhythm that binds them together, is a force that can bind you to things that you're doing repeatedly. Doesn't matter what it is. We'll talk more about hypnotic rhythm. It's a subject that was broached deeply in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, and I just found a hard copy of that the other day, so we're definitely going to get into that. So that's the 5th day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of each kind, cattle and crawling things, and wild beasts of each kind. And so it was. And God made wild beasts of each kind, and cattle of every kind, and all crawling things on the ground of each kind. And God saw that it was good. So we see here again, it seems like God goes through another creation of some of the same items or some of the same creatures, but that's not the case. There's different types of, or we are able to recognize the different levels of consciousness in animals. So God's already created animals that operate just according to the hypnotic rhythm. They're just acting as anchors. All their job is to be fruitful and multiply, right? Now God creates the wild beasts and the cattle, the animals that have desire, hunger, passion, experience pain. If you take an objective look at it, you understand that first, God creates a state that we can occupy where we're acting as an NPC, where we're just going along with the flow. It's a mental state that we can occupy. The same as the birds, the same as the fishes, going with the flow of things, going along where everybody else is going along. That's a mental state that we can occupy, where we're on our human equivalent, our human wavelength, operating just according to hypnotic rhythm. We're NPCs. We're not in control of our destiny. We're not creating anything. Well, we're creating, yes, but we're not aware of what it is we're creating. Completely asleep, right? So day 6 comes out, and God's creating now the wild beasts who have passion, who have hunger, who will go out and hunt. He's creating other animals who have fear, who know that they can be hunted, who know that they need to run. He's creating animals who have families, who build communities, right? And we don't even see it like that. But these are states of consciousness that we can occupy, that we've mastered at the human level of consciousness, right? So God creates the different states, and he creates thought forms of other animals to occupy these states, to act as training vessels for us, and when we reach this level of awareness, if we choose to tune into nature. And God said, let us make a man in our image, by our likeness, to hold sway over the fish of the sea, and the fowl of the heavens, and the cattle, and the wild beasts, and all the crawling things that crawl upon the earth. Now, before we get to the actual creation of the concept of man, you have to talk about the fact that this is a direct Hebrew translation, and even in this translation it says, God said, let us make a human in our image. And the King James Version is, let us make man in our image. Now, there's been a lot of pendulums that have been created about this statement, let us. Now, understand, the information that I'm giving to you is looking at this from an objective view, understanding that source underlies all things. So even if through the medium of an avatar of some extraterrestrial life form, God's will was brought about, it does not change the fact that source is the underlying force behind all phenomena, right? Cause and effect exists in everything. God is the cause, right? Those beings, Anunnaki, whatever it is that you want to call them, would not exist if it weren't for the underlying framework of God. So when the writer of the Hebrew Bible is saying, let us make a human in our image, as what God is saying is just indirectly allowing you to understand that there is a method that these things may have taken place for to come about, but it does not change the fact that as a concept within the mind of God, this is how the creation took place. It's source. Source is the cause of it all. So source, now having layered out all of these different things, is ready to create a human in his image. So in his image, what are we talking about here? Where's all of this still taking place? Because no matter has not come about yet, right? This is all still taking place within the mind of God. So at this point, he's creating the concept of a man. And God created the human in his image, mind. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. This has been confusing for people. People will say, okay, well, first, male and female, he created them in the instance that he created them. So later on, when you see that he took a rib from Adam, that is something different. That's Adam's second wife, Eve, versus this being Adam's first wife, Lilith. This is a conception in the mind of God. Right now, man is an idea in the mind of God. The principle of gender exists, right? Male and female, he created them. It can be akin to this. You thinking that this is when God created your mind. Your subconscious being that feminine portion, right? And your conscious mind being that masculine portion. That feminine portion being completely receptive to any of the thoughts that you give forth. That conscious portion being the portion that you direct, the portion of your awareness that you filter all of these emotions through. So all of these lower mental states that God created, you're the filter for them. All of those emotions, you're not supposed to fall subject to them. You're supposed to be able to direct them, to recognize them, and allow them to flow through you without falling subject to them, right? Every person, male and female, has the capacity, right? We all have a deep subconscious mind that is fully receptive and outputs whatever it is that we input, right? We all have a conscious or masculine front mind that is constantly thinking something, constantly trying to create thought forms, constantly running wild, that we need to tame, that we need to reel in. And now we have the blessing, and God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and conquer it. Hold sway over the fish of the sea, and the fowl of the heavens, and every beast that crawls upon the earth." And God said, "Look, I have given you seed-bearing plant on the face of all the earth, and every tree that has fruit-bearing seed. Yours they will be for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, to all the fowl of the heavens, and to all that crawls on the earth, which has the breath of life within it, the green plants for food." And so it was. And God saw all that he had done, and look, it was very good. And it was evening, and it was morning, the sixth day. So we have the blessing. So God has created all of these concepts in his mind, right? And now he's created the concept of man. And now the mind of man has been divided into a male and female, the conscious and subconscious mind, that all exists of this substance that God is made of. This stuff that started out just as a vibrating void, right? All this is where all of this is taking place, right? That's chapter 1. That's not the end of creation, though. That's not the end of creation. So we take a look at the blessing, the gift of good for all. We talk about continuous nourishment and infinite dominion. The first thoughts that God implants within the mind of man that he's just created. Thoughts of continuous nourishment. Thoughts of infinite domain. Those are the first thoughts that he imparted, right? That's the blessing. And now we move to the Sabbath. Then the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their array. And God completed on the seventh day the task he had done. And he ceased on the seventh day from all the task he had done. And God blessed the seventh day, and hallowed it, for on it he had ceased from all his tasks that he had created to do. This is the tale of the heavens and the earth when they were created. After the 4th verse of chapter 2 of Genesis, we begin talking about the effect of all of the thoughts that God just had. Because with chapter 5, the book begins on the day the Lord God made earth and the heavens, no shrub of the field being yet on the earth, and no plant of the earth yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not caused rain to fall on the earth, and there was no human to till the soil. But we just went through all of this information that talks about the creation. Where did the creation go? If this is the day that God created all of the heavens and the earth, right? And it says, oh, this is the day that God made the heavens and the earth. But we're talking about this after the seventh day, the day that God ceased to create. So what's going on here? This is where the Sabbath is incredibly important. And we need to look at what God does on the Sabbath, because if you miss what God does on the Sabbath, then you miss the whole point of everything it is that I'm trying to teach you, of everything it is that I'm trying to make you aware of. And God completed on the seventh day the task he had done. And he ceased on the seventh day from all the tasks he had done. So at this point, God stops creating. He stops thinking. All of creation was good. He formed all of these ideas within his mind. These were all thought forms within his mind, right? But there was only one way for his creations to come alive. And that was if the life that he is, the presence that he is, if that presence occupied his creation. So God ceases to work and he falls into a sleep. And in this sleep, he begins to dream. And in his dream, he sees himself as you. And here's you, going all about your day, not realizing that you were fashioned in the void, that vibrating substance that makes up God. Not knowing all the foundations that were laid just to get you here. All the generations of effects from the initial cause that is God, that led to you being conceived. All of the different struggles that God took you through, grew you through, to get you to today, where he's still dreaming that he is you. And now it's time to wake him up. So here's you, this person believing that you're just a human, not knowing that you are God, not knowing that the entire creation process has been laid out for you. Just in this chapter 1, in the first few chapters of chapter 2 of the Bible. So let's go back and re-examine it and look at what the lesson is for us in this creation. Day 1, we see that God is operating in a void. It's dark. It's not necessarily that it's dark. It's that everything is mixed together. There's no way to see through. Everything is just jumbled. What does God show us there? Don't fear the unknown. Your unlimited potential. What does God do? His breath was upon the waters, hovering, vibrating with unlimited potential. At this point, nothing has been created, right? So here is how you go through this creation process to create your world, your reality, like God, the God that you are, right? It starts with this. Close your eyes. You don't see anything. Anything that's in front of you, you don't see. You don't even see light. It's just void. It's just unknown. There's just potential. That's all that exists. Call it an alternative space. Call it the spiritual realm. But even in this, we see from the mind of God comes the spiritual realm. So what's higher? Mind, mentalism. The all is mind. This universe is mental. So you don't fear the unknown, because you know that you are the one true source. And you know that the I am of you, or your imagination, is the one true God. Because before all of these layers were built upon the void that was, right? So what is God doing? Right? What is he doing? In the beginning, hovering, elsewhere described as eagles fluttering over its young, so as to have a connotation of parturition or nurturing. He was nurturing the potential, cultivating his energy, magnifying love and gratitude for all that it was. That's what he's doing. That's how you start. In this realm of infinite potential, you start by cultivating your energy. Just being aware of being. Some call it meditation. It's as simple as, I'm here now. And then allowing whatever to be. Cultivating that energy. You see that from the first day, rhythm takes effect. Your night will become day, and your day will become night. But that doesn't stop you from creating. You see that from the void, you're dealing with night and day. From the void, you're dealing with rhythm. But if you stop at the void, you don't add all the layers to your world. So let's keep going. It's day one. You don't fear the unknown. You're cultivating your energy. You have gratitude, right? For all that is. You recognize the day and the night. Rhythm is in effect in all things. Now you move on to day two. Understanding the trifold man. Day two is where the light and the dark waters were divided. The creation of spirit in the mind of God. Spirit and matter were separated, overlaying each other. We see the creation of the three planes, mind, body, and spirit, on the second day. And in this, we can only assume, based on all that comes after the second day, that these mind, body, spirit vessels were created to act as a channel for all that we see and deem good. Because if we see it and deem it good, it's magnified in our awareness. So we see the breakdown that we have. Day three. We are in the waters beneath the vault. We're made of the substance of God. In everything, we start with the foundation of love. You begin your creation by planting fruit to harvest when your thought take material form. So you start from the end. On day three, God plants all of the fruits and all of the life-giving properties, all of the substance that can later be harnessed. And while, yes, he calls it good and he assigns judgment to it, which creates the possibility of barrenness, at no point does God have any fear. So no excess potential is created. He's not wavering in thought at all. So here's you. You're thinking about the fruit of that mental state that you wish to occupy. You cannot waver in thought. Understand that if you assign a judgment of your particular mental state as good, by default, you're creating the antithesis. Whether or not you experience that antithesis is dependent on whether or not you allow fear to dominate your thoughts. It's easier for you to create from a state of indifference than it even is for you to assign judgments of good. Until you've proven him enough to yourself that the I am of you is God, shoot for indifference. Don't shoot for what's good. Shoot for indifference with the good of all in mind, but shoot for indifference towards it. There's a difference. Now we move on to day 4. Light and darkness already exist. And at this point, God is directing the creation of light. And by default, he's creating lower laws. This is the day that God creates astrology, time, the precession of the planets, space, without invoking excess potential. So for you, this 4th stage is for you to give the world surrounding your mental state. So you're nurturing the fruit of this mental state that you wish to occupy. You as consciousness, because that's what you really are, right? masculine and feminine principles of consciousness, God, you give the world all of the tones of reality. So in your mind, you live in this world. You're hearing thoughts. You're hearing conversations from loved ones at the end of your journey that affirm the completion of your journey. Giving the world or the mental state that you wish to occupy all of the tones of reality essentially means making it feel as real to you in your mind as the picture that you see when you open your eyes. Can you do that without assigning judgment? And if you do assign judgment, because it's perfectly fine for you to, we see that God assigned judgment, can you hold enough faith in your vision to not allow fear to dictate your creation? Day 5. Day 5 is when God creates the rhythm of consciousness that we deem lower intelligence. School of fish, herds of birds. Their consciousness acts as anchors. So what's the lesson that we take from that? Set your anchors in your new world. If you're not already creating habits that you want to carry forward into your new reality, then you should start. Because when you start creating your reality, it's a lot easier for you to extrapolate those habits over time as anchors for your world, right? Right now, there are anchors that are tethering you to the reality that you're at. It can be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your job, it could be addictions, it could be places that you go into, it could be anything, right? So in this world that you're creating, this thought form that you're creating, right? This mental state that you're fashioning, that you're going to step into, right? You set anchors. So you picture yourself doing routine things that seem mundane in action, but over the course of time, they have great impact to you. They're so normal to you that you naturally radiate at a state of indifference towards them. So when you extrapolate it over time and you see yourself doing these things later on down the line, it's easier for you to see it without adding excess potential to knock you off course or have balanced forces kick your ass back when you're trying to create this. So now we go to day 6, where we're beyond hypnotic rhythm. Oh, and that's another point as well. So day 5, the mental state of hypnotic rhythm. Just as earlier I stated, we can fall into hypnotic rhythm about negative things that we're doing repeatedly, right? You can create your own hypnotic rhythm by intentionally doing habits that you know are going to lead to your goals over time. Then you fall into your rhythm, right? That's how you execute dominance over that mental state, which these states were created for us to have dominion over. It's not about dominion over the creature of the fish or the creature of the bird. It's dominion over that state. So here we are, and you're trying to fashion this state because you know that whatever mental state it is that you occupy, by law, that state has to bear fruit. The fruit would be all of the things that govern that reality of that state. So whether it's you wanting to be a business owner, if you're a business owner, that means that in your reality, you own a freaking business. That means that you have all of the things that come along with being a business owner, including the connections, including the meetings, including the potentially late nights, including all of the annoyances, the deals that fall out, the customers that cuss you out, that are upset with you if that's what you're doing. You get what I'm saying? It's about the entire reality, creating the entire reality. As far as anchors, I did have a couple of notes here. It can be things like the gym, or rituals that you have before you eat, Rituals that you have when you wake up, rituals that you have when you sleep. And I say rituals, but routines. Day 6. Day 6 was the creation of wild beasts and cattle. Desire, hunger, passion, the experience of pain, all of these other additional mental states, animalistic mental states, right? On day 6, it's important that you hold dominion over your desires. Recognize them as fulfilled within your vision. If a lion doesn't believe that he can capture a gazelle, he won't. No matter how hungry he is. If a gazelle doesn't believe he can get away from a lion, he won't. No matter how fast he is. At this stage, holding dominion over your desires, recognizing them as fulfilled, is incredibly important, right? At this point, you're traversing through mental states that we all know are incredibly hard to fall out of. They can drag you into all types of pendulums where you're doing things, operating in a way that is against your best interest. Understand that whatever actions that you're taking, they represent an assumption of an underlying belief. So if the assumption underlying the act of, if the assumption is the fruit of a belief of lack or that you don't have, your experience is going to be that you don't have, regardless of all that you've created, all the work that you've done, adding the tones of reality to it, only to, in the final layer, add an element that acts as a barrier between you getting it, and that being a thought or a belief that you don't have it. You can allow an outlet for excess potential through indifference, derived from balance. Balance exists in everything. You see that during the entire creation, down to the conception of the concept of humans, balance existed, and any excess potential was dissipated through not even allowing fear into the picture. For you, trying to get to that frequency where we can create as impeccably as God at this stage, that's what this is about. Trying to raise our frequency to a point where these laws come naturally to us. We can think a thing and we know it. Or we have a thought and we know that that's not what we want to create, so we cancel it or say, you know what, that's not even right. We let it go before it has time to be crystallized in our mind. This creation path that's laid out at the beginning of Genesis is just one model that you can look at. And throughout the Bible, there's tons of allusions to different avenues that you can use to bring whatever reality you want from this void of infinite potential into matter. But you got to understand that there's a law by which all of these things operate. And if you understand the law and you operate within it, you can create amazing things for yourself. Amazing things. Now, we'll get to whether or not we're going to complete chapter 2 and 3, not now, but we will, to talk about the temptation and understanding how God ensured that you were an independent consciousness or an individuated consciousness, how he ensured the creation was perfect. But understand, your reality starts with your thought. It starts with your thought. And the canvas upon which you need to create, it has to start from the void. Meaning you need to clear out all thoughts in your mind, especially the thoughts of lack, the thoughts that are contrary to what it is that you're trying to create. You need to start from the position of all that exists is unlimited potential. Now, we get to the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, you see God rested. He ceased from all the tasks that he has done. For God, on the Sabbath, he became you. Started moving, living, breathing as you. Sleep within you. You not knowing that you're him. And now he's waking up in you. And you're realizing, you're coming to the realization that all power is given unto you. And there's nothing that you can't create. So here it is. You've gone through this process. You've created your world. And now your creation is complete. What do? You rest. It's imperative that you rest. It's imperative that you cease from doing any more work. Now you trust the law. And you walk in it. You live in it. You live in it so much that you forget what was before. That's what God did. He became you. He's not pretending to be you. He became you. He became you so much that you don't even know that you are him. That's the way it has to be for you. On the Sabbath, you're just resting in the knowing that what you created is here. You're living in it. And anything that you see in this material world that's contrary to it, you change it in your mind. And watch, you'll start to see things take form. A bridge of incidents will appear. It'll appear as someone giving you or making an offhanded statement that correlates exactly with what it is that you were thinking about. It'll appear in the form of an opportunity that arises that's fortuitous specifically to you for your situation. It'll appear in a set of circumstances that seems miraculous in nature, problems that just dissipate. That bridge may appear murky. There may be dark clouds surrounding it, but I promise you, on the other end is your happiness. I love you. I want to see the fullest expression of you. This is the spark.